Hey, thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Be Helpful Experiment. I'm Paul Fleming McCullough, and I'll be sharing the good things that happen when we put people first. So today is today's first episode of this ongoing kind of podcast, although it's on video, so I get a video cast, right? I don't know, whatever you call it. But it's an opportunity for me to share, like I said, right, the good things that happen when we put people first. So things from my experiences, and then also interviews with others too. So we kind of get all sorts of different perspectives across, right, different industries, different, right, from different cultures, all that kind of good stuff. So I thought today I will go through, I'll give a little bit of background on kind of like the Be Helpful Experiment, kind of where I'm coming from with my thinking. And then I will also finish off with, right, two examples of, you know, the good things that happen, right? So one from business and one from life. So what is the Be Helpful Experiment? Kind of like where does it come from? So like I said, the point is I've got this theory to prove that good things do happen when we put people first, right? That we can be successful in business and in life. You know, when we take time to, right, to be kind, to understand the people around us, right? So whether that's family, friends, co-workers, or boss, you know, and what happens when we actually sit and we listen to what their needs are, and we help them and we support them, right? So that we become somebody that, right, people want to work with, that, right, that people want to be friends with us. We want to be friends with them, right? That we're happy when we come home at the end of the day, right? And our family's happy that we're home too. So, right, so how do we get to this point of being, right, somebody that others can rely on? And that's the driving force behind, right, my idea that good things happen when we put people first. So that's what I'm at to prove, right? And then the experiment is all about, right, the different ways that we can do that. So the different ways that we behave in the office, how we ask our co-workers to do things for us. So for example, if we're a team leader or a project manager, how do we ask people? How do we influence people? So maybe we're doing change initiatives and we have people who are champions, but we also have people who are resistant to those changes. How can we influence them in a positive and an ethical manner, right, to come on board, to get excited for what we're doing? How can we, right, how can we be a better right, family member, a better husband, brother, sister, mother, wife, all of those kind of things? How can we be a better friend? So Be Helpful has, right, the dictionary definition for Be Helpful is somebody who is useful, right? You are useful. Now, I've actually added on, I have a couple of different contexts to add to that. So the first one, obviously, right, as an individual, me, I'm useful, right? I mean, otherwise, right, what's the point being here, right, if we're not useful, to be blunt about it. But as an individual too, also, right, I want to be somebody that others can rely on, that they come to me and say, hey, Paul, can you do this for me? Now, not for some big ego trip, right, but simply because I'm helping them to achieve what they need to. Because there's a huge amount of satisfaction, right, when we're helping people. You know, because when you see somebody smile and you solve a problem for them and you make their day better, oh my goodness. I mean, really? I mean, just the amount, I mean, seriously, I get a huge satisfaction off that, right? I mean, that puts a big old grin on my face. You know, I mean, it's that idea of karma. You know, like kind of what you put in, you get out, right? So if we put in goodness and kindness, that's what we're going to get back. If we are angry and we put in fear and panic and anger, right, that's what we're going to get back, right? We'll get that back in spades. But like I said, but if we're putting in positive things, like the kindness and sincerity, we get those back. So you have karma, and then also from a business perspective, right? So from a leadership style, we have servant leadership, where as a team leader, we are there to support our teammates and our colleagues, right? And our team members. So we're there to help them achieve what they need to do to meet their goals and their objectives and to get their results. And when we do that, we're helping ourselves, because as they're achieving their results, in turn, we're achieving ours. So you see, so it's a very kind of symbiotic relationship. you know, when we are putting people first and we're doing good things about it. Second part, to be helpful, and this is something that comes along in a lot of the stuff that I talk about in other videos, on other things on my website, right, other articles and stuff, is the business context for be helpful for me, which is understanding what people need to be successful and then providing that right solution. And then once we've done that, because if we understand what they need and we provide that solution, and it's the right solution, that's the key. And that's one of the things that we'll be talking through, right, as we go through this series, is how do we provide that right solution? How do we understand people? And how do we provide that right solution? Because when we do that, people keep coming back and they keep coming back for more. We get that repeat business. So in many ways, when we put people first, I mean, a benefit and an advantage for us is that we stand above our peers because we're able to deliver on the projects that others can't deliver. But also, too, we're the reason that customers and our teammates keep coming back for more, that idea of repeat business. Now, fundamental for me, and repeat business is quite a personal thing for me, because over the years I've worked for a large number of different companies, but there are two that kind of stand out because they had a lot of potential, they had wonderful projects or products, and they had a huge amount of talent on the team, right, working for them. But they were so wrapped up in just selling stuff. That's all they were interested in. That's all the senior managers were interested in, was selling and making money. So they didn't really care about that client and business and seller relationship. For them, it was all about just make the sale and move on to the next one. And the amount of effort and energy that they would put into making that initial sale, but then there was no relationship onwards. And so there was never any repeat customers. And ultimately, both companies failed. And I think, and that's a huge, and I'm really, and that's really sad. And that's a big, because it's very sad for the people that were working, right, that were working for them. And so for me, that's why a really big kind of learning point, one of the things I've learned over the years from managing teams and seeing other people manage, right, is that it's about building those relationships. It's all about that trust. Right? Because as we're building that trust, people will open up, and it makes it easier for us to understand what they need to be successful. But that also then makes it easier for us to be able to provide the right solution for them so they can be successful. And like I said, it's all about building that trust. So here's where the experiment bit comes in now, right? Because you be helpful, experiment. And the experiment for me is that you just go out and you try stuff, right? You see what sticks, and if it works, great, you do more of it. And if you're doing something that doesn't work so well, you stop doing it, or you tweak and you move on. So here's a quote from Buckminster Fuller, and he was the sort of the architect and just, I guess, visionary, sort of right back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I think he was the one who popularized the geodesic dome and made it, you know, sort of more structurally sound and actually so it could be used. But he's got this to say about experiments. So every time man makes a new experiment, he always learns more. And for me, that really defines this idea of an experiment. Because we're learning, because we're going in and we're making informed decisions. We have an expectation as to what's going to happen, right, when we go out there. And it's okay if things don't work out, but if they do, excellent. And like I said, we do a little bit more of the things that work, and we stop doing the things that don't work. And also, to me, I'm a positive outlook kind of a guy. I try to be as easygoing as I can be. And it's always right, the glass is kind of half full. It's never half empty. Because there's always something in it, you know. And so for me, like I said, I take that positive view. And so an experiment feels very much like we're setting ourselves up for success. Because we've thought about what we're going to do. We've thought about the variables. We've got our theory, we've got our method. We know what we want to achieve out of it. I'm not a big one, honestly. I'm not a big one for the whole, right, feel the fear and do it anyway. Step outside your comfort zone, or, you know, that kind of fail fast approach. And I get it that though that works for certain people, and good for them, right? I mean, we're all individuals. And I think that that's what makes the world go round. That's what makes the world so interesting, is that we are all so different. But for me, I'm much more about setting myself up for success and to think that I am actually going to succeed at this rather than expecting to fail and then having to do something about it. I'd much rather get my ducks in a row first and then go out and then go out and do it, knowing that I am going to succeed. So here's a couple of examples of what happens when you put people first, from that being from being service oriented, from a charity and a community standpoint. So when they first, after they'd retired from work, they both put a lot of time and effort into the communities and doing a lot of charity work and that kind of stuff. And so, and in fact, for my mum, one of the things it gave, she won a Queen's Award a couple of years ago for her work with the Befrienders Society. And so Befrienders is where there's a group of them, my mum and a bunch of others, and they'll go around and they will talk with sort of elderly people who are considered either vulnerable or they're living on their own, they don't have any transport, there's no family around. And so literally they're going around to be a friendly ear, to listen, you know, and to just kind of provide a shoulder and a friendly face for other people to talk to. And like I said, she won a Queen's Award for this, for all of the work that she'd been doing, because she was sort of in at the ground level for the local chapter. And that meant that she actually went to Buckingham Palace, had kind of like a big afternoon tea party on the lawn, and I think she actually spent a couple of minutes talking to Princess Anne, you know, which is kind of cool. I mean, that's kind of very cool. You know, I'm very proud of my mum for that. But because my mum and my dad have been sort of very community and charity oriented for about the last 30 years. They've been the ones that lived in the same place for a long time. They know a lot of people. And my mum is very much one of those where she's very service oriented, very giving. My dad's the same too. And my mum doesn't expect anything back in return at all. She's very surprised when it happens. Now, unfortunately, my dad's kind of got sick over the last couple of years. And in fact, actually, just a couple of days last week, he got rushed into hospital and ended up having an emergency hip operation. So things are good from that standpoint, luckily. In fact, he actually had the operation yesterday. But what's kind of been interesting is that all of the people that have come to help my mum in that meantime, so people who have been buying food, so particularly with the coronavirus and the pair of them being sort of in lockdown in the house, they weren't able to go shopping. So people have gone shopping for my mum. People have been moving furniture around to try and help my dad sort of get around the house a little bit better. They've also been trying to provide meals now that dad's in hospital and give mum a friendly hand and say, hey, look, what things can we do? And this is all because for the last 30 years, because she's just so friendly and giving, and it's now coming back. People are like, oh, hey, remember that time that Anne did this for us? Hey, well, now's our opportunity to give back. It's a wonderful thing. It's a very powerful thing. Honestly, it's a very moving thing. That my mum is knowing that my parents have that support. And for me, it's a big deal because, well, it's a big deal anyway. But me being here in the States, my parents being in England, that I can't, the support and all of the friends and the people that she knows and all of that giving that she's done over the years is now coming back and providing the physical support that I can't provide. So like I said, that's a big deal. Okay, so here's a business example when we put people first instead of processes. A couple of years ago, I was asked to gather all of the supervisory organization data for the large university that I work at. So this is kind of like HR data, right? So it's who reports to whom, right? So from the top with the university president, all the way down to our student employees. Now, they tried to gather this data the year before, but it had gone terribly, because all they'd done is they just sent out a mass email with a single spreadsheet and gone, fill this in. And unsurprisingly, they only got about 25% of the data that they were needing, but they also got a lot of angry pushback from managers going, really? This is a lot of effort. So they took a completely different approach and said, hey, Paul, it was terrible. Can you fix this for us? So I sat down, and my approach, as you know, right, people first. So I sat down and I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I pulled together, so this is what I did. So I pulled together a group, working group, from all across the university, all sorts of different levels, different colleges, different operations units, all sorts of people. So we've got a working group of about 25 different people. And I said, hey, look, this is what we would like to do. This is why we need to do it. What's a good way to get us there, to get that data? And so I was able to build, because I pulled everybody together as a working group and said, hey, look, I would like your feedback. I'm interested in what you have to say. I was able to build that trust and to help them understand why we needed the data to now be collected and held centrally, whereas before it's very distributed. Because we've got a big ERP software coming. And what were the SUP-org data, the supervisory organization data, is central to that. I mean, it is a core, it's a foundational piece to it. And so I was able to, help them understand why we needed the data. And then in return, they helped me understand how big a lift of it was, how much effort was required, right, to gather all of that data. Because it's not just a simple, oh, it'll take me 5 minutes, I'll just send you my PowerPoint, or I'll just send you my Excel file. It wasn't like that. I mean, when you have a unit with 2,500, nearly 3,000 people in it, that's going to take a long time to gather all of that data. But because we had that trust and that level of comfort with each other, I understood what their needs were and how they needed to get the data. And they understood why I needed the data. We were able to come together and collect all of that data, like the whole 100%, that full data set, by the time that we needed it. And it was all because we took that people-first approach and the policy and our process second. So there's a couple of examples, as to what happens, the idea of that kind of karma, that servant leadership approach to, to being helpful, to putting people first, which really is what it comes down to, I guess, ultimately, the advantage from a business standpoint, right, as an employee standpoint, is that when we put people first, like I said, we're going to stand above our peers because we're able to grow trust with people and have relationships that others can't get. We're also able to, because we have that trust and those relationships, we're able to deliver the projects that others can't. So that's going to give us a huge amount of value and help us really stand out and really grow our careers. And because we're able to do that, we're able to get that repeat business. So that's good for us, say as an employee of a company. It's good for the company, right? Because repeat business means more money. More money means job security, and it also means promotion and growth. Maybe it's also good for us as, say, consultants, or if we're running our own business. Repeat business is what we want to get. And then in life, when we put people first, well, we're a good person, right? We're somebody that others want to be around. We help people. We make people smile. We make them laugh. We make, generally, wherever we go, that idea of lighting up the room. We're somebody that people want to be around because we make their worlds better. So there you go. I'm Paul Fleming McCullough. Be helpful. All right, so if you like that, and I hope you did, then, standard stuff, you know the drill. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, head over to my website, the links will be below, and subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll also I'll send you a copy of the Be Helpful Triangle, which goes into some more detail of what we just talked about, and helps you to deliver better projects and change initiatives, and be a better team leader, right? And then also follow me on LinkedIn. Terrible sales pitch, isn't this? So, and then follow me on LinkedIn and engage on my posts over there. Cheers, peeps. Have an awesome day.